Hey guys, this is Abdullah Virk, and today I'll be sharing my honest opinions on the Apple event and all the products that were unveiled. So there was the Mac Studio, the Studio Display, the M1 Ultra, which is the last and fourth iteration in the M1 family, and also the new iPad Air and iPhone SE, and the new green iPhone color. So in this video, I'll be sharing my honest opinions on it and be explaining exactly what it means and if it's a good product to buy and if it's not a good product to buy. So let's get started. First, Apple talked about Apple TV Plus, where they're adding live baseball onto Apple TV Plus. Previously, it was like, it's been confusing with DirecTV and etc. How confusing to make it. So Apple plans on making it live every Friday, and they're launching it in 9 countries. And I think it should be starting, I believe, in a couple of months from now, but I'm not too sure. But that's pretty much the entire Apple TV recap. Now we're going to be talking about the green iPhone 13 color. So Apple always does these kind of mid-cycle refreshes because it just becomes much cheaper for them economically to add something to it rather than at launch. So they added the green iPhone 13 color on the 13 series and the 13 Pro series. From what I see, I like the 13 Pro green shade much better than the standard 13 color. It just looks much better. Of course, might as well just wait for the 14 series in September, but if you want an iPhone 13 in green, now you have an option. Now, speaking of iPhone, so let's talk about the iPhone SE. So now it's been 2 years since Apple has refreshed their iPhone SE. With this iPhone, it's just basically minor refreshes, minor changes into the design and specs. It's just the A15 chip and 5G. That's basically it. And also they increased the price by $30. Thanks to inflation. They added the A15 chip, which is the same chip used in the iPhone 13, which is very powerful. And it allows for more camera features like Smart HDR and diffusion, and all that means basically you're getting very good quality photos, low noise and low light photos, and high contrast in your photos. That's the same exact features from your iPhone 13. And also from the A15 chip, it's supposed to be at least twice as fast as your original iPhone SE from 2020, for much better longevity, longer software supports, and in general, since the A15 is much more newer than the A13 chip used in the iPhone SE 2 years ago, it's much more power efficient. So Apple's claiming they've made the battery physically larger in the iPhone SE. Of course, it's not going to be as good as the iPhone 13 series, but it still should be much better than nothing. That's the entire iPhone SE. If you want something that's cheap and entry level to the iPhone series, you don't want to pay $1,000, go for it. I know some friends who might want to consider getting this phone, and it's great. Pre-order start today on Friday, and then it's available to the world starting next week on March 18th. Another thing I forgot to mention for the iPhone SE. iPhone SE now supports fast charging from 0 to 50 in 30 minutes, and it uses a 20-watt adapter, sold separately, of course. It's Apple, and it's not MagSafe supported, which is basically the magnet thing where it just attaches to the wireless charger so you don't misplace by accident. Unfortunately, that's not supported. That's only on the iPhone 12 and 13 series. The iPhone SE still has the iconic Touch ID and home button, so if you're someone who doesn't want to use the swipe features on the new iPhone series, the home button is a much better option for you. And of course, it has Touch ID, which is pretty much, I think, the last iPhone that has it actually. It's actually interesting. So next, Apple has unveiled the iPad Air since September 2020. So the main feature is the M1 chip, which is the same exact chip found in the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro 13-inch, the Mac Mini. They're basically Mac chips. Very, very powerful. Supposed to be at least 50% faster than the A14 chip in general in CPU performance, and twice as fast in graphics. So now because of the M1 chip, it allows for a much faster transfer speeds on the USB-C port in the iPad. It goes to 10 gigabits per second, which is really fast for transfers. But of course, it's not going to be as fast as the iPad Pro, which uses Thunderbolt 4, which is 40 gigabits per second speeds. Still uses the same Apple Smart Keyboard, the same Apple Pencil. Still compatible with those. So of course now the front-facing camera has been upgraded from 7 megapixels to 12 megapixels, and for the first time in the iPad Air series, it supports center stage, which essentially is the iPad will recognize if someone, or for example you, or is moving in the frame. So now the camera is going to automatically switch to like where you are, and if multiple people join into where you are, it's going to zoom out so it can fit everybody in, which is a very smart feature. It was first unveiled in the iPad Pro from last year, so it's nice to see making its way here. Because of the M1 chip, it now features the 5G modem with the iPhone SE, so now you're getting pretty much faster transfer speeds if you're outside. Of course, it still does not support millimeter, which is the faster variation. So the new iPad Air has a screen brightness of 500 nits, which is, you know, pretty bright for outside, but for a tablet. Of course, it does not feature ProMotion, which is the high refresh 120Hz display found on the iPad Pro and the iPhone Pro series. Now let's talk about the price. So in Canada, it's going to start at $749, and in the United States, $599. There's no price increase at all, and it's going to be available for pre-order starting today, and it should be available to the entire world next week. So now let's talk about the M1 Ultra. This part of the keynote blew my mind. I was not expecting this kind of chip. Honestly, I was expecting the M2 chip. So with the M1 Ultra, it's basically two M1 Maxes from the MacBook Pro glued together. So it just means everything's doubled. So it's still built on the 5nm process, so still cutting edge. So you're getting twice the amount of CPU, twice the amount of GPU, twice the neural engines, and twice the accelerator blocks, twice the ProRes and media engines, etc. So it's going to a 20-core CPU, a 64-core GPU, a 32-core neural engine, and I believe up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory. So what that means is, for example, if you're doing video editing, now you have exactly 128 gigs of memory to use. The memory subsystem is going from 400 gigabits per second in the M1 Max to 800 gigabytes per second. The way they managed to make two M1 Maxes glued together is called the Ultra Fusion. So it's using 10,000 signals to talk with each other, and they're calling it the Ultra Fusion technique. And it just allows like up to 2.5 terabytes per second transfer speeds between the chips, so they could talk with each other quickly. This chip is just insane. Graphics wise, it's much faster than the 3090 series while using 200 watts less power. There's two neural engines. It's going from 11 trillion operations per second in the M1 Max to 22 trillion. So according to Apple, because of this new M1 Ultra, it's claiming that it's much faster than a 16-core desktop while using 100 watts less power. The M1 Ultra also features 8 ProRes accelerators, which basically encode and decode your video files. The M1 Ultra also has a secure enclave, which is essentially a secure element in the processor where it stores all your biometrics, passwords, and etc. onto the chip. M1 Ultra also has 114 billion transistors, which are over 7 times as the M1. Let's talk about the Mac Studio. That's where they're going to be using the chip for the first time. So now let's talk about that. Mac Studio features two of their M1 chips. So the M1 Max, the same processor used in the MacBook Pro, and the M1 Ultra, which is the newly announced chip that's using two M1 Maxes together. So that's just really great. And of course, Apple claims that this is their top performing desktop Mac in their lineup, even more powerful than the Mac Pro. Apple claims that this Mac Studio can actually run very silently because of the Apple Silicon, and it can fit under any computer display, which is great to see. So the Mac Studio features 4 Thunderbolt displays, a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, 2 USB-A ports, an HDMI port, and audio jack. The Mac Studio also features Wi-Fi 6 support. It's still using Bluetooth 5, which is still very nice. On the front of the device, there's 2 USB-C ports that feature 10 gigabits per second speeds, which is on the M1 Max. But if you go for the M1 Ultra, you're getting 4 times that. You're getting up to 40 gigabits per second, which is Thunderbolt 4 speeds, which is great to see. And it's using an ST-XC card slot. So if you want to get a memory card for videos, swap it, put it in, which is great. And the best part is it's on the front of the Mac. Apple also claims that because of the M1 Max chip, it's 50% faster than the Mac Pro with a 16-core Xeon processor and 2.5 times faster in CPU performance than a 27-inch iMac with a 10-core i9. For the M1 Ultra, Apple says that it's 90% faster in CPU performance than a 16-core Xeon processor in the Mac Pro, and it has 60% faster CPU performance than the highest end 20-core Xeon processor in the Mac Pro. And in terms of G performance, the M1 Ultra is 4.5 times faster than the Radeon Pro 5700 XT and the 27-inch iMac Pro, 80% faster than the Radeon Pro W6900X, and the Mac Pro. Mac Studio will start at $1999 for the M1 Max and $24.99 in Canada. The M1 Ultra will start at $39.99 in the United States and $5,000 in Canada. So Apple has also unveiled a new display called the Studio Display. It's designed to work with the Mac Studio, and the Studio Display is a 27-inch display with a resolution of 5K, which is the exact same 27-inch iMac. The display has a peak brightness of 600 nits. It supports P3 wide color gamut, and it supports True Tone in the macOS software. The Studio Display also has a dedicated 12 megapixel front-facing camera that supports center stage, the exact same feature that I told you about on the iPad Air. So if you're moving in the frame, it's going to zoom out, or it can zoom in on you. And if multiple people come into the frame, it will zoom out so you could capture everybody in the frame. And it features the A13 chip, which is found in the iPhone 11 series. And what that basically does is just controls the audio, the visuals, the camera, and the speakers. It also features a 6-speaker system consisting of 4 woofers and 2 tweeters. There are 3 USB-C ports on the back of the display, and there's only a single-use Thunderbolt 4 port, which allows for 40 gigabits per second speeds. Because of the Thunderbolt port, it supports up to 96 watts of power. So with that kind of power, it can also charge a MacBook Pro 14-inch and charge it really fast in 30 minutes. It does not have ProMotion. Some people might have wanted it, but I think that's coming in a Pro Display XDR refresh. The display is going to be available to order on March 8th, and it's going to be available on March 18th. And it's going to start at $15.99 in the United States and $19.99 in Canada. 27-inch iMac is unfortunately discontinued. Near the end of the keynote, Apple hinted the Mac Pro refresh with Apple Silicon. So they said Mac Pro will be for another day, which just hints that they're confident about Apple Silicon coming on to the Mac Pro series. I got this right, the M1, whatever I think it's going to be called the M2 Extreme. It's above the M1 Ultra, which is the highest end processor you can get in the Mac lineup, but that's going to get up to a 40-core CPU, a 120-core GPU, a 64-core Neural engine, 256 to 1 terabytes of memory, which is the unified memory, and possibly 1600 gigabits per second of memory bandwidth that allows for that amount of unified memory. Overall, this keynote was actually very enjoyable. I liked it. Of course, I didn't care too much about the iPhone SE, but some of my friends will. The iPhone 13 in green, it's a nice color, but of course, just wait for the iPhone 14. And the iPad Air, it's a very good tablet for the price with the M1 chip. It's just overkill, but it's gonna last you a long time. But honestly, just go for a MacBook or just go for the iPad Pro, because you're getting much more features, a ProMotion display, much more storage, much more RAM, and in general, you're getting a much better display quality. And you're getting 4 speakers. With the iPad Air, you're only getting 2 speakers. The iPad Pro series is supposed to be refreshed this year in the fall with the M2 chip, so I'll go for that one. And otherwise, the M1 Ultra, that chip just blew my mind. That chip is actually very interesting. The Mac Studio, that's also a very good product for professionals. But overall, that was the entire Apple recap and honest opinions on it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment and make sure to like and subscribe. And my socials, and I'll link this in the description below. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.